They tell you the first thing you notice about the Vessari is the eyes. They tell you wrong. The first thing you notice is the silence, the way a room full of human noise goes still when one of them enters it, the way your own pulse becomes suddenly, embarrassingly loud. My name is Mara Quinn. I was the human liaison aboard the orbital station Concord, and I was warned about exactly this, in writing, in a document I signed. Article 7. Prolonged unaccompanied contact with Vessari nationals is discouraged due to documented neurochemical affinity between species. That was the phrase the lawyers chose. Neurochemical affinity. As if you could fit it in a phrase. As if you could sign your way out of gravity. The Vessari came to us 9 years after the war we nearly lost. Not to them, to ourselves, the way humans always do. They arrived without weapons, which terrified us more than weapons would have, and they offered us the one thing we could not refuse: the jump corridors, the mathematics of distance, the keys to every star we had ever wanted. In exchange, they asked for almost nothing. Observation rights, cultural exchange, a liaison program. I took the posting because it paid off my sister's medical debt in 1 year, and because I was 34 and had organized my life with the ruthless tidiness of someone who has decided that wanting things is a structural weakness. I had a 5-year plan. I had a 10-year plan. I want that on the record, whatever this recording becomes. I was not a romantic. I was the least romantic person on that station. His name, the part of it my throat could manage, was Dhaviel. He was the Vessari envoy to Concord, and the briefing files described him as approximately male, approximately 50, approximately 7 feet tall, and the word approximately was doing heroic work in every line, because nothing about Dhaviel resembled an estimate. The Vessari are built like questions your body answers before your mind has finished reading them. Skin with the deep, shifting iridescence of oil on dark water, a second luminous membrane behind the eyes that opens only, I would learn, in low light or in honesty. They speak 2 ways, aloud, in accented trade tongue, formal and amused, and beneath that, skin to skin, in a language of bioluminescent pulse and warmth they call the Undervoice, which the treaty forbade them to use on humans. It is very hard to describe the Undervoice to someone who has never felt it. The closest I can come is this. Imagine every word you have ever wanted said to you, said all at once, without sound, directly into the blood. For 5 months we worked. That is the truth, and I will keep telling it. We worked. Trade schedules, docking disputes, one memorable incident involving a smuggled crate of Earth citrus that 3 Vessari crewmen reacted to like controlled euphorics. Dhaviel was precise, patient, and funnier than the briefing files had any hope of conveying. A dry, sideways humor that arrived without warning and left me more than once, laughing alone in a conference room while he watched with that grave, glimmering attention, as if my laughter were a phenomenon he was being paid to study. I noticed I had started wearing my hair down. I filed that observation away with all the others I was not having. There were others. The citrus incident ended with the 2 of us inventorying the confiscated crate at 1 in the morning, and he held a slice of blood orange to the light like a jeweler, and asked if all human fruit was named so violently. And when I laughed, he went very still, and the stillness lasted 1 second too long, and we both pretended it hadn't. There was the docking dispute that kept us in a conference room through 2 full shifts, at the end of which he walked me to my quarters because the corridors were on night cycle. And at my door he said good rest, Mara Quinn, with a formality so perfect, so reinforced, so over-engineered, that I lay awake afterward understanding for the first time that Vessari formality is load-bearing, and wondering what exactly his was holding up. There was the day I cut my hand on a cargo seam, and he crossed the bay faster than I have ever seen anything that large move, and then stopped. Hard, completely, 1 meter away, hands at his sides, and asked, in a voice with gravel in it I had never heard before, whether he could be permitted to call the medic. And I understood that the question he was actually managing was whether he could be permitted to touch me, and that the answer he had been given by his own treaty, his own discipline, his own beautiful, soundproofed life, was no. I began to dress for the deep shift walks. I began to despise the meter. I began, in the privacy of my own skull, where there are no treaties, to conduct experiments, standing fractionally closer in the lift, letting my sleeve brush his when handing over a tablet, and cataloging, with the cold rigor of a scientist who has caught fire, the response, the way the light under his skin would surge and then be forced smooth, like a sea ordered to behave. He knew. Of course he knew. He was being read by the best reader in the room. The station's lights ran on a 26-hour cycle, and in the deep shift, when the corridors emptied, we had begun. Neither of us ever proposed it. It simply began. Walking the observation ring together. We kept a careful meter of distance. I want you to understand the discipline of that meter. I could have drawn you that meter from memory. I dreamed about that meter. Your treaty, he said one night, on the ring, with the gas giant Thessa rising honey gold through the viewport and his hands folded behind his back, forbids the undervoice with your species. Do you know why? Documented neurochemical affinity, I recited. That is the phrase, yes. The membrane behind his eyes shifted, catching the planet light. Do you know what it documents? No. The trials were small, 11 of your people before the prohibition. He was quiet for a moment, and the silence had texture, the way Vessari silences do. Your species hears the undervoice more completely than we do, Mara. We speak it to each other, and it is conversation. We spoke it to humans, and it was... He paused, choosing with that terrible care of his. Confession. Both directions. 11 trials, 9 marriages. The lawyers found this alarming. And the other 2? Transferred, by request. They said, and here he looked at me, fully, for the first time that night, that it was unbearable to know anyone that well only once. I laughed, because it was that or something irreversible. So your people can't lie in it, the undervoice. We cannot lie in it. We cannot flatter in it. We cannot perform in it. He turned back to the viewport. It is why we wear so much formality everywhere else. You have seen our robes, our ceremony, our beautiful diplomatic sentences. That is our privacy, Mara. The undervoice is what we are protecting everyone from. A pulse of light moved, slow as syrup, along the iridescence of his throat. And though I had no training, none, I understood it the way you understand weather. It meant protecting myself. I went back to my quarters that night and stood under the water ration with my forehead against the wall and conducted a complete, rigorous, professional review of the situation, and the review concluded that I was in catastrophic trouble. Because here is what the briefing files do not tell you about the Vessari. The eyes, the height, the oil-dark shimmer. Your body files all that under beautiful and moves on. What it cannot file, what it has no drawer for, is the attention. Humans look at each other in glances, in summaries, in thumbnails. Dhaviel looked at me the way you read a document you will be tested on. 5 months of being studied like that, of being the most carefully read text in the room, performs a kind of slow demolition on a person who has organized her whole life around being skimmed. The incident, the one in my file, the one that ended the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan and began everything else, happened on the night of the Accord renewal, when the station hosted 400 delegates and the great hall blazed with both species' finery. I wore the formal gray that liaisons wear, and he wore the envoy's robes, layered and ceremonial, his soundproofing at full strength, and across that crowded hall, through 2 governments and 100 conversations, he found my eyes once. Only once. He was always disciplined. It was always once. And the look lasted exactly as long as a sip of wine. And it said what it always said. And I raised my glass a centimeter in reply, which said what it always said. And 400 people watched 2 professionals exchange nothing at all. I left the hall early. I told myself it was the noise. I took the long way through Ring 3 because the long way was quiet, and I stopped in the archive bay to pull treaty records for the morning session, and I heard the door, and I did not have to turn around to know. 5 months of that silence had taught me its exact weight. He said he had seen me leave, and that he had brought the amended docking schedules, and we both regarded the amended docking schedules, which neither of us would ever be able to describe afterward under oath. And then the power failed in Ring 3 for 11 minutes, and the emergency seals locked, and the only other person sealed in with me was him. 11 minutes. Hold that number. I'm going to give you all 11. The dark in a sealed archive bay is absolute. No viewport, no status glow, nothing, except 3 meters away, the slow, living luminescence of a Vessari with his formality failing. Minute 1. We were professionals. He said, "The seals will hold." I said, "I know." 2 more beautiful diplomatic sentences, and then the silence took over. And in the dark, I could hear my own pulse, and beneath it, very faintly, a low, harmonic hum I had never heard before. And I realized with a feeling like missing a stair that I was hearing him, that the formality, the robes, the careful meter of distance, all of it had been soundproofing, and the power was out. Minute 2. Mara. Just my name. But the undervoice rides on proximity and warmth, and the air itself was beginning to carry the edges of it, and my name in his mouth arrived with its shadow attached, every time he had thought it. I felt that. I felt the count of it. I had to put my hand against the archive shelf. Minute 3. I should move to the far wall, he said, and his voice had lost its amusement and found something underneath that I had been hearing in my dreams for months without knowing what to call it. The treaty discourages, I said. I read it very carefully. Discourages. Minute 4. He laughed, once low, helpless, and the bioluminescence surged with it, throat to wrist, lighting the bay like slow lightning, and in that pulse of light, I saw his face unguarded for the first time, and what was on it was not alien at all. It was the oldest expression there is. It was wanting, held for a long time by someone very strong. Minute 5. I crossed the meter. I wanted on the record that it was me. My file says proximity event, instigation indeterminate, and that is a lie of mercy someone wrote for me, and I am correcting it now. I crossed the meter in the dark, with my heart going like a launch sequence, and I found his hand, and I put my palm flat against his palm, skin to skin, which is how the undervoice speaks. And I said, out loud, with the last of my professionalism, "Confess, then." Minute 6. There is no human word for it. I have had 2 years to find one, and I am telling you it does not exist. The undervoice came up my arm like warmth coming back to a frozen limb. That same ache, that same almost unbearable sweetness of feeling returning. And it was him, all of him, arriving at once. The 5 months of discipline, the meter of distance and exactly what it had cost to maintain it. The way he had watched me laugh and named the feeling in his own language with a word that does not translate, that I felt rather than heard, that meant something like the first warm current in a cold sea. And under all of it, steady as a heartbeat, the one sentence the undervoice cannot dress up, repeating, you, minute 7. And it goes both ways. That is the part the 11 trials documented, the part the lawyers feared. He felt mine. Every careful denial of 5 careful months, every observation I had filed away unread. He received the entire archive of my wanting in a single second, and I heard him make a sound in the dark that no formal robe in the galaxy could have contained, and his other hand came up and cradled the back of my head, as if I were something his ceremony had been built entirely to protect. Minute 8. What happened in Minute 8 belongs to us. I will tell you only this. The Vessari speak with warmth and light, and warmth and light have no single point of contact. They arrive everywhere they are permitted, all at once, and I permitted. His hands learned the architecture of my face, my throat, the line of my shoulders. With the same terrible thoroughness he brought to everything, as if I were a treaty he intended to honor clause by clause. And every place his skin found mine, the undervoice followed, low and molten, saying things that bypassed my ears entirely and bloomed directly along the nerves, and I discovered that being wanted in 2 languages at once is not twice as much. It is a power of magnitude they do not have instruments to measure. I heard myself say his name, the whole name, all of it, the part my throat had never managed, and I will never know how I knew it, except that he had just spent 2 minutes writing it into me. The dark bay glowed like a tide pool at midnight. The light ran from his hands in slow waves and broke against me, and I understood why the 11 trials produced 9 marriages, because pleasure is a word for the body, and this had the body, had it entirely, had it trembling. But it kept going past the body into the place where you keep what you are, and it lit that too. I forgot the name of my station, my planet, my 5-year plan. I remembered my own name only because he kept saying it. Minute 9. We stopped. He stopped, with a control I still think about, forehead bent to mine, both of us shaking, the light along his skin pulsing slow and bright as a struck bell. Not like this, he said, hoarse in plain trade tongue, the formal language, and I understood. He was reaching for his own soundproofing and finding it in ashes. Not in an accident. Not where you cannot leave. Mara, when the doors open, you have to be free to walk away from this, or it is not a confession, it is a trap. Minute 10. We stood apart in the dark, 1 meter, the old meter, rebuilt out of nothing, while both of us could still feel the ghost of the undervoice fading from our skin like heat from a stone. It was the hardest engineering project of my life, that meter. We built it together. That is also a love story. Maybe it is the most love story thing we ever did. Minute 11. The power came back. The seals released. The light was ordinary and white and merciless, and we were standing a meter apart, the envoy and the liaison, and a maintenance officer leaned in and asked if we were all right. And Dhaviel said, in his beautiful diplomatic sentence, "The seals held," and only I saw the light moving at his wrist, under the sleeve, saying something else. I requested the transfer myself the next morning. You will have heard that part. It was in the tribunal summary. leaked to every feed in the system. What the feeds never understood was why. They assumed scandal, shame, the treaty. The truth is what the 2 trial members said, the ones who walked away all those years ago. It is unbearable to know anyone that well only once. I did not transfer to escape him. I transferred because the treaty made anything else impossible inside its walls, and then I stood in front of the tribunal, on the record, in the docket that bears my name, and I petitioned to amend Article 7. The 2 years of the petition were their own kind of long distance. We were forbidden contact while the case was open. His counsel insisted, mine agreed. Both were right. So he wrote letters, paper letters, carried on supply runs, because paper cannot pulse and therefore broke no law. And Vessari handwriting turns out to be very beautiful and very bad at hiding anything. The letter forms leaning hard into certain words, like a voice leaning into a room. I have all of them. 41 letters, 1 per supply run, and not one of them contains a single sentence a tribunal could object to. And all of them together say only one thing. The thing the Undervoice says in its endless, patient repetition. I wrote back in kind. We courted, in other words, in the most heavily lawyered correspondence in 2 civilizations, and I am here to report that desire does not require privacy. Desire requires only attention, and attention was the first thing he ever gave me. It took 2 years. It took the testimony of 9 marriages. They came, all 9 couples, some of them gray and stooped and still standing palm to palm at the witness rail. It took Dhaviel resigning his envoyship, which the Vessari registered as the single largest formal sacrifice their delegation had ever recorded, and which he described to me privately as the easiest decision available. The Undervoice at his wrist, glowing steadily, incapable of flattery. The amendment passed 11 months ago. Consenting adults, full disclosure, voluntary contact. The clause has a number, but in the corridors of Concord everyone calls it the Quinn provision, which mortifies me, and which Dhaviel finds so funny that the first time he heard it, he laughed in the Undervoice with his hand in mine, and I had to sit down on a public bench until the joy was survivable. We were married in the human ceremony first, then in his, which has no vows. Of course it has no vows. The Vessari do not promise in words. Words can lie. In their ceremony, you simply stand palm to palm in a darkened hall, in front of everyone you love, and let the Undervoice say what it has always been saying, with nothing left to interrupt it. You, you, you. Of the wedding night I will say what the Vessari say, which is nothing, with light. I will say that there was no treaty in the room, and no meter, and no soundproofing left in either of us, and that he was patient the way oceans are patient, and that I finally learned what the Undervoice becomes when it is given hours instead of minutes, and permission instead of an accident. I will say that the dark of our quarters held its own slow aurora until almost morning, and that somewhere in it I laughed, once, helplessly, at nothing, at everything, and felt the laugh travel through my palms into his skin and come back changed, brighter, his. The neighbors filed no complaint. There was nothing to hear. There was everything to hear. It depends entirely on your instruments. The lawyers were right in the end. It is documented. There is an affinity between our species, neurochemical and otherwise, and it is not safe, and it is not manageable, and it does not fit in a phrase. It fits in a life. I am living the documentation.